Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and dive in and see what we get today. Oh, it looks like we're actually having a little bit of a sale here, so anyway, let's get started. And for our first pull, we got a Juggernaut 10mm pistol with plus 50% limb damage and plus 1 agility. So the Juggernaut's effect is kind of the opposite of the bloodied effect. It gives you more damage as your health increases up to, I believe it's a maximum of 25% at full health. So it's really not exciting, and it's actually a little bit harder than you might think to stay at full health, especially if you are not a stealth build, although this is the kind of weapon that you could definitely use in stealth, so you could get a little bit more benefit from it out of that way. But even so, you know, taking a few points of rads or whatever is still going to knock you off full health and therefore knock you off that full bonus. So definitely not the best first star. The plus 50% limb damage, it's never been one of my favorite effects. It could be half decent on this weapon just because it has low damage and a half decent fire rate if you put an automatic receiver on it and go guerrilla build. But even so, I still feel like if you're looking to cripple your enemy's limbs, then you're better off using the perk cards that give you the chance to cripple the enemy limbs. So really, I kind of consider that a do-nothing second star. And then the plus 1 agility, it's not a bad effect. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to complain about getting an extra point of agility, but at the same time, it's really not doing a whole lot, and definitely not as good as some of the other third stars, such as faster reload or less VATS AP cost. So overall, this one is pretty disappointing, so let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got a Suppressor's Hellstorm missile launcher with 25% faster fire rate and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Suppressor's effect is not one of my favorite effects again. It's not a terrible effect. It basically does what it says. It's just that I don't see a whole lot of times in the game where you really need to reduce your target's damage output. Generally speaking, I think you're just better off killing your enemies to reduce their damage output. And that said, if you're interested in being a support build, the Suppressor's effect could be very good for you, but this is probably not the weapon that you want to carry around as your go-to weapon for something like that. So overall, a little disappointing on a missile launcher, although you could actually potentially suppress a large number of enemies that are relatively close together with the explosion from this, so I suppose you could get some utility from it out of that way. The 25% faster fire rate, I'm not sure how much difference that'll really make. That might actually be worth trying out sometime. I found out on the Alien Disintegrator that even when you're running it with a semi-automatic receiver, it is the 25% faster fire rate does still allow it to fire noticeably faster. So I'm kind of curious to see if this weapon does the same, or if it's pretty much the same fire rate either way as some weapons are. So it's kind of worth trying out there. The VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. This is probably, I mean, you could definitely use this weapon in VATS. One thing to keep in mind is it's a launcher weapon, so if you miss your VATS shot, there is a chance that your projectile will just go off into nothingness and you won't get any explosion from it, but that doesn't mean you can't use it in VATS. And, you know, having your critical meter fill 15% faster and get more criticals means that if you are using VATS with this weapon, then you've got more of those theoretically guaranteed hits from the VATS criticals. So that could be a good thing. Overall, though, I think this one's still pretty much a dud, so let's move on to the next one. And here we've got a Suppressor's Cryolator with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and 90% reduced weight. So the Suppressor's effect is actually kind of interesting on the Cryolator because the main use of a Cryolator is to slow down typically big enemies, like the big bosses, like especially the Scorchbeast Queen, so that she doesn't fly off, or if she does, she flies off very slowly. And in that regard, being able to suppress the damage output at the same time could actually be kind of interesting. That said, I still think you'd probably be better off with like a quad or something like that, but the Suppressor's Cryolator could be interesting. The Vast Critical Hits doing plus 50% damage, I don't think that's really the effect you want on this weapon. It's a very good second star for weapons that are better in VATS, but this is the kind of weapon that even I would probably use primarily either by aiming down the sights or just hip firing. So the 90% reduced weight on this weapon is great because this is definitely a situational kind of weapon, but so you're not going to want to take up a lot of your inventory space with a weapon that you're not going to be using all the time, but since it weighs a whole lot less and because it doesn't have a lot of optional mods there, the 90% reduced weight is pretty good on that. So overall, this one I would classify as kind of interesting, potentially worth trying out. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Nocturnal Gatling laser with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Nocturnal effect is not as bad as it used to be because it no longer gives you a penalty during the day in-game when you're using the weapon. You just don't get any bonus, which really, in my opinion, is enough of a penalty right there. The bonus that you get at night is pretty solid, so if you're the type of player who would remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, then Nocturnal could be pretty good for you. I'm not that type of player, so Nocturnal's pretty bad for me. VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and VATS critical meter filling 50% faster. We talked about both of those a little bit earlier. This is definitely not the kind of weapon that you would want those effects on typically because with its extremely high fire rate, you are just going to chew through your AP so quickly that you're going to have to do most of your firing in either hip fire mode or aiming down the sight. So overall, this one's pretty much a dud. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got another dud pretty much. We've got a Juggernaut's light machine gun with the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and breaking 50% slower. So the Juggernaut's effect we talked about earlier, and it pretty much all holds true here. It's not the worst effect by any means, it's just pretty unexciting in my opinion. I could see maybe a lower or mid-level player running around with something like this just because it doesn't really cost anything to try to keep your health at full, considering how many stim packs and such are available in the game. But overall, it's just not exciting. And then the second star, the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, is basically a do-nothing second star. On a weapon like this, I believe this weapon has 70 or 80, if I remember correctly, on its base magazine, which is pretty low for most heavy weapons, but still pretty high for rifles and things like that. But that means multiply that times 4, and 1 in, 280, 320, whatever it is, somewhere in that ballpark, I believe, is going to be the number of times you're going to get the double damage. And you just can't count on it. You'll never know when it's going to happen. It's just totally worthless. The breaking 50% slower, that's a solid effect because I don't think anybody really enjoys fixing their weapons or their armor for that matter. So having to do so less frequently is a good thing, especially with a weapon with a high fire rate like this that is just going to break a little bit faster than some other weapons just because of that extremely high fire rate. So overall, that might actually be the best star on the weapon. This one I'm going to call probably on the lower side of mediocre, but let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got a Mutant's Ultrasound Gatling laser with plus 50% limb damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Mutant's effect is unexciting. It's not a bad one because I feel like most players, high-level players anyway, are likely to have 5 mutations by the time you get the standard ones like Marsupial and Speed Demon, either Herbivore or Carnivore, whichever you prefer, plus a couple of mutations that are useful to your build. So you're probably not giving up a whole lot by using the Mutant's effect. You probably already have the 5 mutations you need to get the maximum of 25% damage bonus. It's just that that bonus is not that exciting. So It's not terrible, it's just not exciting. And the plus 50% limb damage, this is probably the type of weapon that effect is best on, like this and miniguns and things like that have really high fire rates with relatively low per shot damage, because it will give you a decent shot at crippling a limb relatively quickly before you kill the enemy and before they can get to you. So I could see some value in that, but again, I still think you're better off if you're looking to cripple things to just run the perk that gives you a chance to cripple things. And those perks will work very well with high fire rate weapons. The faster movement speed while aiming, that's kind of a do-nothing star, because even if you have the speed demon mutation, it's really not doing anything for you at all. But if you don't have the speed demon mutation, it will do something, but I just don't think that there's a lot of players running around the game aiming while moving simultaneously a whole lot. So it's situational at best, and probably not going to come up a whole lot for most players. So anyway, let's go on ahead and move on to the next one here. And here we've got a Furious Pipe Pistol with 25% faster fire rate and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Furious effect is not one of my favorite effects, because you have to put so many hits on the enemy before you actually get the full benefit from it, that at least as far as day-to-day farming, most enemies are going to be dead before you see your full benefit from the Furious effect, which to get the full benefit, I believe you need to hit them 9 or 10 times in roughly this. You need to hit the same target. It doesn't have to be the same. I don't believe you don't have to target the head necessarily over and over. Like if you hit the head and then the chest, I believe the Furious effect will be fine. But if you target a different enemy, or one of your shots just happens to miss and hit a different enemy, then it resets it. So it's not the worst effect out there on a fast-firing weapon, but it's just not exciting. Now, the 25% faster fire rate, that actually improves it a bit, because you can get those shots on the enemies pretty quickly, and the pipe pistol is a pretty low damage weapon, so you could typically get at least like half the bonus or something from a lot of enemies like super mutants and robots and things like that with this particular version of the weapon, just because of how many shots it's going to take to put them down. So being able to get those shots off faster is a good thing. And then the 50 damage resistance while aiming, I would definitely use a weapon like this in VATS, but if you're the type of player who would prefer to aim it down the sights, then that's some free damage resistance. It's not a whole lot, but you know, if you run around aiming a whole lot, you know, while you're firing, then it could prove fairly significant for you. You do want to keep in mind that there is diminishing returns when you have armor with damage resistance totaling around 300 to 400, but it will still do something. It just will be, you know, less and less of how much it adds. So overall, this one is sort of interesting, pretty mediocre. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Medic's Light Machine Gun with bullets exploding for area damage and 90% reduced weight. So unfortunately, if the first star on this weapon was better, this could actually be a pretty solid roll. The Medic's effect is not a terrible effect. It could actually be very good if you're wanting to play a support build and use VATS, but because of the high fire rate on this weapon is really not the ideal candidate for VATS usage, making the Medic's effect quite a bit less useful than it otherwise would be. The bullets exploding for area damage is just one of the best, and in some people's opinions, the very best second star for ranged weapons in the game. And so, you know, it's just extra damage, and you can't argue with that. So that's great. And the 90% reduced weight on a heavy gun is a really good thing, because they're pretty heavy to begin with. I'm not sure that this weapon was actually, you know, 48 pounds before the 90% reduced weight. So I'm not sure that we're getting the full benefit from it, even with no mods on it. And it is worth noting that the mods, once you install them, they do not benefit from the 90% reduced weight. So you're not going to get the full benefit, but heavy guns typically have fewer mods than like rifles and pistols and things like that. So overall, this would be a fairly solid weapon. if the first star was better. It's still not bad, something that I could see, you know, a mid-level player running around with until it got something better. But overall, not too exciting. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Berserkers Pipe Pistol with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So the Berserkers effect, kind of like the Nocturnal effect, is not as bad as it used to be because they removed the debuff for having damage resistance. So that's a good thing, but even so, it's still a lot harder to survive as a character running around with full health but no armor than it is to be running around with good armor but low health the way bloody builds do. So when you take that into account and consider the fact that the Berserker's damage bonus is less than the bloody damage bonus, it kind of doesn't make sense to be a Berserker's build unless it's just for roleplay or challenge purposes or whatever. So overall, definitely not the most exciting first star. The second and the third star, however, synergize very well together, with the critical hits doing plus 50% damage and critical meter filling 15% faster. That means that you're definitely going to get some more criticals than you otherwise would, and getting some extra damage from them could actually go a long way towards improving the overall fire rate of a weapon like this, and could actually increase your damage per second enough to make something like this somewhat workable. I mean, it's never going to be a powerhouse, it's a pipe pistol, but you can put a suppressor on it, so, and you can make it fully automatic, so you can get some decent damage out of it that way, at least damage per second. So it's not exciting, but it's not the worst thing that I've ever rolled. So anyway, I'm pretty sure we're around 10 right now, but I figured we'd just go till I'm around, you know, 2100, because I started around 3100. So here we go with the next roll. And here we've got a Hunter's 10mm pistol with plus 25% damage while aiming, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So the Hunter's effect is probably one of the worst of the Slayer's effects, just because there's not really a whole lot of times that you're going to be running around actively hunting animals. Sure, you're going to kill the ones that you randomly run across and such, but even then it's probably not typically worth keeping a weapon around specifically for those situations. Now, sure, the 10mm pistol is pretty light, so with that in mind, it might not be such a bad thing with the pistol, but still, overall, pretty unexciting on the first star. The plus 25% damage while aiming, that is a good thing, especially if you're the type of player who prefers to aim down sights to using VATS. Pistols and rifles, I tend to use in VATS almost exclusively, so I wouldn't get a whole lot out of that. Although I love that effect on heavy weapons because I do typically aim them down the sights. But, you know, if you're the type of player who does prefer to aim down the sights regardless of what you're using, then that's just free extra damage for you. And then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, that's kind of interesting, but I really feel like if you want to be better in stealth, just run the appropriate sneak perks and increase your agility, and that's going to be your best way to do it. And then, you know, if you still need more help, run a full set of chameleon armor or something like that. So overall, pretty unexciting. Let's go on ahead and keep trying here. Okay, this one's actually kind of interesting. Here we've got an Aristocrat short plasma pistol with plus 50% VATS hit chance and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Aristocrat's effect is one of the better effects, probably, or possibly at least competing for the best effect for full health builds, because it's plus 50% damage, and all you have to do to get that extra damage is have your characters run around with 32,000 caps or more on them. So that's not that hard once you get past a certain level and have bought most of the things that you care about from train stations. Please note, I'm not a great example of that because I do a lot of crafting and things like that, so I run around and buy resources just so I don't have to go search for them sometimes. So, you know, I'm not necessarily the best example of that, but for a lot of players, that's very true. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's one of my favorite effects. It basically is extra damage because it allows you to very easily target the enemy's weak point, such as the heads or the thrusters on a Mr. Gutsy, and so forth for some extra damage. And it even increases the effective range because it offsets the range penalty when you are firing beyond the range listed on the weapon card. It is worth noting that you will still see the damage drop off beyond that, which is 50% for most weapons, but sometimes it's still worth being able to get that damage in at that range, so I'd find it useful. And then 25% less VATS AP cost. That is one of the best effects, in my opinion, for a weapon that is easily used in VATS, and the plasma pistol or rifle, however you configure it, is definitely one of those weapons that you can very easily use in VATS for some extra damage. So this one I might end up doing some sort of a weapon spotlight on or something, especially considering that the weapons for, or the damage for energy weapons has been normalized against energy resistance, so as compared with ballistic weapons, so it's kind of worth seeing how the plasma weapons perform these days. So let's see here. We've got, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 more here. Let's see what we've got. And we've got a Nocturnal Crusader pistol, with the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, and +1 perception. So we talked about both the Nocturnal effect and the last round effect. The Nocturnal effect, not great for me, but for some players I could see it being useful. The last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, basically crap. There's just really nothing else to say about that one. +1 perception. It's not terrible. Again, I don't see anybody really complaining about getting an extra point of perception, but its primary benefit is that it gives you some extra VATS accuracy, so you know, if you're not using VATS, then it's not doing a whole lot, and even if you are, then that +1 point of perception is not giving you a whole lot of extra accuracy, so overall, this one's pretty much a dud. Let's try it again here. And this one is also a dud. We've got a Suppressor's Salvaged Assaultron head with +50% VATS hit chance and 90% reduced weight. So the Suppressor's effect we talked about before, the VATS, +50% VATS hit chance we talked about also, but it's kind of interesting on this weapon because this weapon, one of its unique features is that you can keep charging it up. I don't remember how many you can put in it maximum, but you can keep charging it up with fusion cells over and over again, and then fire it and release all of those fusion cells in one shot to do potentially a lot of damage. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It seems really buggy from what I've seen, so definitely not the kind of thing that you would want to rely on for day-to-day grinding or boss fights or that sort of thing, but maybe the kind of thing that you might be able to have a little bit of fun with once in a while, just to, you know, go out and screw around. And if you're doing that, then you might be wanting to use VATS to make sure that you can at least hit your enemy consistently, and the bonus with VATS hit chance could be very good there. And if you're, you know, keeping this weapon around specifically just to screw around with, then 90% reduced weight is great because it's not going to take up extra space in your inventory, really. So overall, I consider this one a dud just because it's a salvaged Assaultron head, but, you know, I try to at least be a little bit positive about each weapon if I can, so. And here we've got a Zealots Railway Rifle with +50% damage to Scorched, which is its effect. And the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and 250 damage resistance while reloading. So, excuse me, the Zealots effect is potentially one of the more useful of the Slayer's effects, just because it does apply to Scorch Beasts, as well as, you know, the Scorch. The Scorch are pretty squishy. You don't really need a whole lot of damage to put them down pretty quickly, but being able to get some extra damage against Scorch Beast and even the Scorch Beast Queen, that's a good thing, especially if you're a full health build, so that's not bad. The last round of the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, well, that's still crap, even on this weapon. This weapon does have a relatively small magazine, so it may be a little bit better than it is on some weapons, but it's still crap. And then the +250 damage resistance while reloading. This weapon, you are going to have to reload it a little bit more frequently, especially if you put the automatic pistons on it and use it automatic, which is the way that I would probably do so. And so, getting some extra damage resistance while you're reloading it is not a bad thing, but I would still much prefer to see a better third star, like, you know, faster reload, for example. But overall, this one's not the worst thing I've ever rolled, but definitely pretty low on the end of mediocre. Let's go on ahead and try one more here, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, I think that's telling me that anything decent that we were going to get, we have already gotten. So here we've got a Troubleshooter's Salvage Assaultron head with replenishing action points with each kill, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So we talked about the Salvage Assaultron head. The Troubleshooter's effect is one of the more useful Slayer's effects, just because there are definitely times when you know you're going to be fighting robots, like when you're running a nuke silo, or when you're fighting the imposter sheep squatch, or in daily ops, things like that. So, you know, it could be worth getting some extra damage, and maybe even keeping a weapon around specifically for them, just because they are not the squishiest enemies around. But this is probably not the weapon that you're going to be keeping around for that. The replenishing action points with each kill, I really don't see this weapon firing fast enough to deplete your action points as long as you drop back out of VATS between shots, even if you're using VATS, because you have to reload it between every shot, even if you're only firing one fusion cell at a time. So, yeah, not really getting a lot there. And then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. Well, this thing, it cannot be suppressed. It's loud, so it's going to give you away. So that third star is not going to keep you in stealth. So overall, didn't really get anything all that exciting today. We did get that Aristocrat short plasma pistol. That's not too bad. That's probably the most exciting thing we got. But I appreciate you tuning in. Please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.